Is this meeting on or has it been canceled? What's happening?
Members of council, we will be starting shortly. Just stand by. Members of council, if you'll take your seats, we're about to start the meeting. Members online, we're about to go live.
I will now call this meeting to order. The clerk has advised that we do have quorum. Please join me in the national anthem. Members, I would like to call upon Mayor Tory to address City Council at this time.
Well, Speaker, thank you and good morning to everyone. Before we get to the orders of business for today's council meeting, I want to recognize and have you join me in recognizing two very sad losses which have taken place since we last met. These two deaths were felt by everyone in our entire city, Her Majesty the Queen on September the 8th, and the tragic loss on September the 12th of Toronto Police Constable Andrew Hong, whose funeral many of us attended last week. Today, we have two motions to express condolences on behalf of City Council to mark these two passings, which were mourned by our residents, everybody right across the city without exception, each in their own way, marking the service to the people of our country and our city of these two individuals. And first, I want to take this opportunity to formally mark with City Council the death of Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Canada. And this will be followed by an opportunity to express condolences for Constable Andrew Hong. September the 8th marked the sad loss of Her Majesty Canada's head of state after 70 remarkable years on the throne. At the time of her passing, she was the longest reigning monarch in British history. In world history, she was the longest reigning female monarch ever and the second longest reigning monarch ever in the history of the world. Many of us have known no other queen. When we think of the late Queen, we remember this long and extraordinary life that she gave to public service. Not just to Canada and to the Commonwealth countries, but to many other countries and people from all over the world. People looked up to Her Majesty as a role model of a strong, enduring female leader, as one of the examples of stability and continuity in a world of increasingly rapid change, in a world presently experiencing a surge of divisiveness. So as a consequence of all of that, this truly was a passing felt and recognized in some way by people from all corners of the world, not just in Britain and not just here in Canada. But the Queen did have a special place in the hearts and minds of Torontonians, and I came to see for myself over time it wasn't Torontonians whose families had lived here for 10 generations. There were many other people who I think recognized in her the qualities that I made reference to, but also in her what she and the institution represented in terms of the success and stability of our democratic system. The Queen did, in fact, visit Toronto 7 times between 1951 and 2010, and often referred to Canada as her second home. Over those 7 visits, she enjoyed a Leafs game at Maple Leaf Gardens, attended the 100th and 3 other runnings of the Queen's Plate, visited hospitals, social service organizations, parks, major cultural organizations, institutions, and businesses. And she also noted and celebrated and commented on the diversity of our great city and had warm welcomes during her visits from groups such as the Monchong Foundation and Corso Italia. And on her last visit to Toronto, the Queen donned 3D glasses and celebrated our growing film community, which is a source of such pride to us all. We have grown a lot and we have changed a lot as a city, and the Queen has been there for some of those big moments. Again, I can see through landmarks around our city, including the Queen Elizabeth II building and Queen Elizabeth Theatre at Exhibition Place and the Rose Gardens at Queen's Park, the Grange Park, and the Diamond Jubilee Promenade in the Distillery District, as well as the trees that were planted just this past year. The Queen also visited a newly opened Etobicoke Civic Centre in 1959 and officially opened the Scarborough Civic Centre in 1984. And here at City Hall, we remember that Her Majesty dedicated the Peace Garden at Nathan Phillips Square in 1984. So it's fitting that in that garden, some 38 years later, we observed as a city a formal moment of silence on the National Day of Mourning, September the 19th of this year. The Queen was beloved by many people across the world and equally in Toronto. And we saw that more recently on the occasion of her passing when hundreds of Torontonians came to City Hall and to the civic centres to sign the condolences books, to leave flowers, and to pay their respects. People from all walks of life and from all corners of this city. Queen Elizabeth II was a constant and consistent, steady hand in our lives and was devoted to her service to Canada, to other realms and territories, and to the Commonwealth as a whole. She was a pillar of strength and stability and decency and care and compassion. I was privileged to meet Her late Majesty on a number of occasions, and you were always struck by how down to earth she was when it would have been so easy for her to be otherwise. So we honor her and her great life of service. She set an outstanding example for us and for people in positions of leadership. And she and the institutions she represented so well have been at the foundation of what, notwithstanding its faults and notwithstanding its days where it might seem otherwise, she has been at the foundation of a stable, successful parliamentary democracy, which has been and continues to be at the root of our success as a country and is admired by many people around the world. And so she will be truly missed. Our thoughts continue to be with His Majesty, King Charles III, with the royal family, and all of those throughout the Commonwealth who have mourned the passing of our Queen. And it is now my pleasure and my privilege to introduce a short video montage of Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II in Toronto and her presence here in our city over the years. At this time, may I invite members of council and those present in the chamber to rise and join me in a moment of silence for Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, followed by the playing of the royal anthem, God Save the King, to mark the accession of Charles III to the throne. God bless the Queen and long live the King. Speaker. I'm just finding my other notes here, and I don't know what I've done with them.
If you can please be seated.
Speaker, I would now like to introduce a condolence motion for fallen Toronto Police Constable Andrew Hong, who died in the line of duty on Monday, September the 12th, 2022. And we're so grateful that members of the Toronto Police Service, but in particular that Constable Hong's wife Jenny and children Mia and Alex are here with us today. And I so much appreciate, as we all do, the fact that in this period of time that you would come and join us for something that I hope you find very meaningful, as I hope you found the ceremony last week. Constable Hong was a 22-year veteran of the Toronto Police Service and a member of the Toronto Police Service Traffic Services Unit, the Traffic Motor Squad, for the past 19 years. While I attempted to do so privately with the family and with his fellow officers and publicly at the funeral, this is a moment for us as a city council and as the people who are elected to represent all of the people of Toronto to formally express, on behalf of all of the people that we represent, our profound sympathy to the family, to Jenny and to Mia and to Alex and to the parents. And I'm, as I said, very happy that Jenny and Mia and Alex could be here today, but I hope you'll also join us in passing along to Jean Pio Hong and Mija Hong, the dad and mom as well, that our sincere sympathies are with them as well. Constable Hong will be missed by many, and you have to have been present in the immediate aftermath, as I was, that terrible night, the next morning at the Traffic Services Unit, and of course at the magnificent tribute that was paid to him last week by all of us as a city, but in particular by the police service itself and by many other police services. And I'm very happy to recognize here today Acting Deputy Chief Lauren Pogue, Staff Sergeant Rob Cho, who has served as the family liaison and I hope has been of so much support as we'd all want to the family, and Staff Sergeant Steve Campoli in the Chief's office, who are also joining us today to honor Constable Hong at the City Council. We saw the reality and the profound impact of this loss on his family, on the policing community, and on our city during the funeral service last week and all that led up to it. It is a moment in our city's history where we came together. These things bring people together. Despite whatever our differences may be, we came together to honor and to remember a person who was beloved and is beloved by many. I was lucky enough to meet Andrew Hong by chance on a few occasions, and his warmth and his presence quickly told me and told many other people, as we heard on the day of that wonderful service, who he was, a good person and a well-respected cop. He had a big heart with an equally big personality, and he was a big person, but he was big in that sense that goes well beyond his physical presence. He was, as we heard on that day, a practical joker who got along with just about everybody and was magnetic. And if you'd been able to be with me that morning at Traffic Services the morning after, to see both the reverence with which he was held, in which he was held by his colleagues, but also the genuine grief that they had at his loss, you would have certainly been moved by that, and you would have understood the impact that this huge personality had as a leader and as a mentor and as a colleague. He was incredibly dedicated as a police officer who was held in very regard by his colleagues, and it wasn't just the fellow police officers, it was the people I had the chance to meet that morning on your behalf. Every mechanic and every person who worked in that Traffic Services garage were people who knew him, and they loved him, and they looked up to him. He was a trusted friend, he was a valued community leader, and most importantly, and I think, there are often times when what people do as parents shine through. And we didn't hear from Alex that day, but we did hear from Mia, and we heard from Jenny, and when you heard from Mia and heard her words and how she delivered them and what she had to say about her family and about herself, I think you could see as well. He was a very dedicated father and a dedicated son and husband, and of course, together with Jenny, seemed to have raised what I think what Mia described as two overachievers, and I think that would be not necessarily the best way to put it, although I'm sure it's true, but they were just two sensitive, caring, articulate, intelligent, and accomplished young people. Last week at Andrew's funeral service, I was joined by my colleagues on council, many colleagues on council, to pay our respects and to support Andrew's family and his police family. There and throughout this tragedy, I think we've seen an outpouring of love and support in the city, and I hope you'll see that continuing today, and I've just indicated to Jenny this morning and to Mia and to Alex that, we all stand ready, whether it's the police service, myself, and on your behalf as mayor, the Toronto Police Association, all of whom have stood in very firm and steady, continuous support of this family since this happened. And I hope that you find some small comfort in seeing the respect and affection that has been shown and that continues to be shown today in all of the tributes that have been paid to him. It's a loss that I think most of us can't really comprehend. How could you possibly comprehend that? I think in particular, and it doesn't diminish anybody else's loss, but parents, I met Andrew's parents, and it's very hard, to lose a child. I think we all know that, even an adult child, doesn't really matter. And, Toronto police officers, as they did, one of the other things that struck me the morning that I was at the Hannah Street garage the morning after was there were the police officers there in their uniform on the job because they had to be. They were there to represent our city and to serve and protect us, and knowing that when they go to do their jobs each day, unlike many jobs, they are called upon to make many different sacrifices, but one which could include the fact that they don't return that night. And the families, of course, make that same sacrifice every day. It's a difficult reality for all policing families, which no words can make easier. But what I can do on your behalf, I'm sure, is to thank the police officers for their service, to thank this officer in absentia for his service, and to thank his family for sharing him with us and for the sacrifice they made and he made in the cause of extraordinary public service. I was, able to see for myself what an impact this has on the police family. I'm sure many of you saw it, whether it's through television or in person as well. And so I think it is an appropriate occasion on which to say to those women and men, thank you for keeping our people in our city and its people safe. You're oftentimes, the people that are very first at the scene of terrible tragedies and putting your lives at risk and serving people in a responsible and compassionate way, and we're eternally grateful for that service. I say to the Toronto Police Service as an organization that we understand this is a tragic loss and a traumatic event for the service as well, for the entire police service. To lose anyone, but to lose someone who's such a respected and key part of the fabric of the organization is heartbreaking. And I want to thank all the members of the service, right up to and including the chief, because I saw the strain that this obviously puts on him. And I want to thank all of them for their commitment to protecting Toronto and the residents of the city. The service of our police officers does not go unnoticed or unappreciated, because I think we know that they embody courage and dedication and sacrifice that is involved with police work, as do their families. And so on behalf of myself, Speaker, and the members of Council and all Torontonians who Constable Hong served and protected for many years, I want to in your presence, express our profound sympathy, but also our deepest gratitude for his service to us, and give thanks to you, his family, for sharing him with us for so many years. And to Andrew Hong, I say, and I hope he's listening as we meet here today, thank you for your service. Thank you for your camaraderie. Thank you for your mentoring that you did, all the mentoring you did, for your leadership and for your dedication to our city and to the protection of our city and the preservation of safety for all of our people. And I would say again to Constable Hong, may you rest in peace, knowing that your colleagues and your city and those of us who are privileged to be here to represent the people of this city, a city that you serve with such care and distinction, are eternally grateful for the work that you have done on their behalf. We will carry the memory of your love and generosity in our hearts forever. And I would now again invite members of Council and those present in the chamber to rise and join me in a moment of silence in memory of Constable Andrew Hong.
Thank you, Mayor Tory. Members, please join me in observing a moment of silence in memory of Donald Don Adams, Audrey Lucas, Peter Oliver, and Morris Polanski. Thank you. We acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. For the benefit of those who are connected to the internet, the city clerk has posted all of the agenda materials for today's meeting at toronto.ca/council. This meeting is being held as a hybrid meeting. Members of council, staff, and the public are participating in today's meeting remotely and in person, and the meeting is being streamed live on YouTube. I'd like to welcome the public who are with us here today and who are watching the meeting online. Today's special meeting of council is for the following purposes: to consider deferred item PH 35.12 from the July 19th special council meeting, to consider urgent new business heritage matters, and to introduce and enact general bills and confirming bill for this meeting. Members of council, this is a special meeting. Under council's procedures, no new business items such as member motions may be introduced. This rule cannot be waived. May I have a motion to confirm the minutes? Moved by Councillor Thompson. All those in favor, raise your hands. Carried. May I have a motion to introduce the new business from city officials? Moved by Councillor Holyday. All those in favor, opposed if any, carried. Are there any declarations of interest? Please indicate the item number and the nature of the interest, and remember that you must also file a written declaration of your interest with the city clerk. No? I will now call for petitions. Are there any petitions at this time? Members, I will now review the order paper. We have one deferred item before us today, item PH 35.12 and 12 new business items. I will now go through the items to take member holds, starting with the deferred item. No? Oh, Councillor Layton? Sorry,
Yes,
I
thank you,
don't,
Madam
your name's
Speaker.
not on the screen.
I'd like to hold PH 35.12, 148, and 156 to 158 Avenue Road.
Okay. Okay, CC 50.5. Yeah, I don't see anything on my screen. Okay, anybody else?
I'd like to hold, Madam Speaker, I'd like to hold Regent Theatre. I don't know the number, I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me.
Okay, so Councillor Robinson is holding CC 50.7.
Thank you.
Any further holds? Okay, and the clerk will open the speakers list in the CMP, and you can place your name on the list. That wasn't done. Okay. Okay, members, all in favor of adopting the order paper, show of hands. Opposed if any, carried. Members, I want to remind you that regardless of whether you are attending today's meeting by video conference or in person, you will continue to submit and approve your motions by email. The clerk's staff are available by email to help you with your motions. If you do not have your motion ready, I will not recognize you. I'm also reminding members that you must state your motion first before you speak to it. So we'll go to our first item, which is PH 35.12. Councillor Layton, you held the item down.
Yes, thank you very much. I don't have any questions of staff, but I do have a motion, and this is a deferral
Okay,
motion.
does anybody have any questions to staff? Okay, Councillor Layton.
Yes, thank you very much. If the clerks could bring up the deferral motion, it's to defer to the first meeting of the 2023 session of council. It's a pretty straightforward motion, so I'll just start speaking to it right away. This renewed deferral speaks to, I think, one of the major challenges that Bill 108 has brought about for our staff and for our city to review heritage applications. By putting in a time limit of 90 days to respond to the heritage aspects of an application after an application is received, I appreciate we want to give our approvals in an expedited way as a city, given the housing crisis that we're facing. But the fact is that there is a difference between reviewing a single-family home or a couple single-family homes and reviewing a larger building in the context of a neighborhood, in the context of the cultural significance of a building, in the context of the architectural significance of a building across the city of Toronto. And there are complexities in the applications that we get for these tall buildings that can't be ignored. In the case of this building, while it's recognized that it is a significant has a significant architectural contribution to the city, there are other city building goals at play that we just haven't had the opportunity to fully address in the planning application. This is at the corner of Avenue and Davenport. If you've ever walked up there, the sidewalk's about 3.5 feet wide at this location, with no chance of widening it unless this building is either demolished or removed. And so there are competing priorities in this case that need a bit more than 90 days of consideration. By the time that application hits the desks and is circulated amongst our city staff, and the time that this council, not the time that the report's done, the time this council has to give its opinion. So work backwards with me. If the application is given on a Monday in November, odds are it's got to hit our chief planner's desk by the end of that month in order to get to the preservation board, then to community council, then to council, because that's the order of things. Mary at Heritage Preservation has a list of outstanding reports for heritage conservation districts that we all have put in. I've put in several, so I apologize, but these are older neighborhoods and some of the downtown core, and an endless list of nominated properties that all of our constituents across every ward have put in for their review. So that Monday morning when that application comes in, that staff member that it's assigned to needs to drop everything else, put a pause on all the other work, and start researching that one site because that developer decided to walk it in on a Monday. Rather than what we used to do, which was address the heritage concern in the context of the overall application. We're not afforded that right anymore. And so what happens as a result? We get the nomination prior to having that community dialogue and that dialogue amongst planning staff, and we generate a report to refuse. So this notion of cutting red tape by just giving us an arbitrary 90 days has done the exact opposite and is forcing more applications to get pushed to the land tribunal to get adjudicated over. What have we done in the name of cutting red tape? Created greater delays. It's absolutely more red tape. It's absolutely ridiculous if you actually think of it for more than a split second. You don't solve the housing crisis just by picking arbitrary dates. You solve it by resources. You solve it by more staff in the departments that we value. And you solve it by actually looking and scratching the surface a bit deeper. I will, in just the last couple minutes, thank the developer in this case has signed what we call a timeline waiver and consent to extend the time period. So just because of this arbitrary date, we had to get the lawyers involved. They had to come up with this language and fill out these additional forms. All in the name of cutting red tape, we've added several other layers. My thanks to Mary and her staff and planning staff for helping navigate through the recent changes to all the Planning Act.
Thank you. Councillor Holliday to speak.
Just on a point of order, Madam Speaker, I'd like to actually question the mover, and I didn't have that button showing on the screen.
3 minutes clarification of the motion.
Thank you, Speaker. Through to Councillor Layton. Is there anything wrong with the report that's before us? Because it's pretty straightforward. It identifies the heritage attributes and suggests that we protect it. I need to understand why you want to defer it further.
So I think what it doesn't do is actually look at the application in front of us in the context of other city building objectives, like our safer, wanting to create wider sidewalks, wanting to add density in downtown areas in close proximity to transit.
So is that the heart of the matter, is that there are some questions around the heritage preservation process and the designation, and there's other factors?
Yes, I would say they're competing priorities as a city, protecting our built heritage as well as achieving more housing, achieving safer sidewalks and streets, which unfortunately that's not Heritage Preservation's job to evaluate all those other, evaluate the application in the context of all of those other priorities, but solely with respect to the significance of the building, which Heritage Preservation, the Toronto Preservation Board deemed an important heritage asset.
So what's the hope or the outcome of deferring this? Because the report's there in front of us, and it lists the attributes, and we kind of have to say yes or no. Why would we defer it? Like, what's the hopeful goal of more time?
Well, the hope is that we consider the application for the application itself, as well as this heritage report, so we can weigh the pros and cons of the various priorities.
Okay, so you want to paraphrase, hopefully if I understand this right, you want to think about the development proposal itself more before you make a decision on the heritage.
Well, my understanding is that a report is coming back with some revisions from the developer sometime early in the new year. I think it's hopefully in line with the first meeting, and the idea would be that we consider the heritage and removal of the heritage or demolition or alteration of the heritage features of the building in the context of the wider application.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher to speak.
No, it's the same. I can't get request a question on my CMP.
Oh, you want to ask
So I'm just going to
questions?
ask a question.
Okay. Councillor Fletcher, question, 3
was that-
minutes.
Thank you. Was that building listed previous to this report?
Don't think so? No?
No, it hadn't been listed. And
I'm
when
calling
did-
a friend there and I'm
and
getting a
when
note.
did that application come in?
The application, I think it should be in the report. We've had public meetings on the application,
You've
so
been able to have public meetings?
we have been given the chance to have
Has it
public
been to
meetings.
Toronto and East York Community Council?
No, it was deferred this report went to Toronto and East York Community Council because it was deferred at the last council meeting.
But the application itself has
For a
been
prelim-
for the community, it's been their
The preliminary report,
recommendation
yeah.
for a community consultation, and that you've held that.
We have had several working groups about it where we were just circulating revisions to the proposal.
Thank you very much.
Okay, are there any further questions or speakers? No. Okay, on the motion by Councillor Layton, it's on the screen. Recorded vote.
Counselor Robinson, please.
In the affirmative?
Thank you. Counselor Cole, please.
In the affirmative?
Thank you. Counselor Perks.
In the affirmative.
Thank you. Counselor Lai, please. Counselor Lai.
Sorry, in support.
Thank you. And Counselor Grimes, please.
In the affirmative.
Thank you.
Yes, in the affirmative, please.
Counselor Bradford, when you're seated, would you please state your vote on the motion to defer this item?
In the affirmative, please.
Madam Speaker, we'd already closed the vote before Councillor Bradford stated his vote, so when it's displayed, it will show he has not voted, but that will be corrected for the record. Speaker, the motion to defer carries. The vote is 25-1.
Our next item is CC 50.514 Rosemary Lane. Councillor Thompson, you held the item down. Do you have questions to staff?
Yes, I do, Speaker.
Okay, questions to staff?
Yeah, through you to staff, and the matter that we've just dealt with, provides some context with respect to the motion that Councillor Layton has just moved and the question's been asked. But I'm curious, with respect to this application, was the designation cited before the matter went to the Committee of Adjustment?
Through the chair, this actually is not a designation report. This is a listing report.
No, I understand.
And no, it was not on the register prior to the TLAB.
It was not on the registry. All right. So there's a letter from a lawyer here, and I've read the letter, and it seems to suggest that the lawyer and the applicant were not aware as to the process that was implemented in order for us to be here today discussing the listing of this particular property. Can you describe, please, the process that was involved and I guess the efforts to notify the owner of the property with respect to your intention of designation?
Sure. Through the chair, the Heritage Act requires notification after a council decision. And we go the extra mile. We try to make sure that owners are aware prior to the Toronto Preservation Board meeting so they can come. So there are times when that is the first time that someone knows and they can come and depute. But in terms of official notification, it's after a council decision.
So with respect to, you've read the letter from the lawyer?
Yes, I have.
And do you have any concerns with respect to their comment? And I heard what you've just said in terms of answering the question about the due process, and they've been no opportunity for discussion and or negotiation, given the fact that this process was actually started as an application to the Committee of Adjustment, which leads them to believe that the only reasons for the designation is that, obviously, and apparently according to what I've read here, is that it is as a result of the process of the application to the Committee of Adjustment. That's the only reason why this process of listing and designation has taken place.
Through the chair, my only concern is that heritage properties are discovered in a variety of ways. Okay. And just because something is subject to an application or even a final decision by the TLAB, which this one was with a refusal,
right.
It does not mean that a property that's been nominated doesn't have heritage value. So our job in heritage planning is to evaluate the property and follow the steps that we can within the time that we have.
Got you. So would there be an opportunity, as this application, this matter is in front of us here, for us to do referral back to have some further discussions to create, obviously, a sense of fairness, because that's what the letter is implying, that it's not fair, the process. What would be the challenge if we were to defer this and to bring this back at a later date? We may arrive at the same conclusion with respect to the actual listing, but in order to allow that process, that fair process that they're asking for, would there be an issue with that? Right?
Yes, there would be in this case, because a listing actually means that if there's a request to demolish the building,
right.
that the city has 60 days to consider designation, which would in effect stop the demolition. So we would be unable to protect this building in the event of a demolition request.
So there's no way that we could have an agreement, given the fact of this letter from the solicitor for this applicant, that in fact demolition would not could take place, and or we, the city, could not restrict providing that demolition permit? There's no opportunity for us to do that?
At this point, we have no such instrument. If you wish to ask city legal the question, but there is nothing in my knowledge that we have right now.
Thank you for that. In my 45 seconds, I will ask city legal to comment on that as to whether or not we could put in place an agreement to ensure no demolition would take place as part of the process to allow for due process, which is what they're seeking. I'm hoping that there's someone from city legal.
Yeah, it's Kelly Matsumoto. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Good morning, Kelly.
So, good morning. There is a process under the act to allow for them to object to council's decision, and then council can consider it again. But we don't have we don't have an agreement in this instance. That's not what's happening in this case. They would have to. We could go ahead with the decision, and then they could object, and then we could consider it again.
That's the only option that's available then.
We don't have an agreement available in this instance.
This is not my ward and so on, but when I read the letter.
Last question.
Yeah, when I read the letter, it just seems as if they had, strong concerns. And I'm just wondering, from your perspective, Ms. Matsumoto, your thoughts in terms of their concerns. Does that make any sense, or do you think that the process that we have in place now is sufficient and that we should disregard the comments that the legal representative for the property owner has actually put forward to us? Yes, thank you, Speaker.
I mean, I would say that the process that's set out in the legislation has been followed, and so nothing was done, that was not compliant with the act. I guess whether it's sufficient is a question for another day in terms of the act, but the city staff has certainly followed the process.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll, questions?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The letter from the lawyer is interesting because it states that the owner of the property would have had no opportunity to speak to a councillor or to the local councillor or to the person who nominated it. It was nominated in December 2021. Long before the TLAB hearing. So my question would be, if I own a property and my property is nominated, how do I find out that it's been nominated?
Through the chair, nominations are actually subject to FOI unless requested. So we do have something on our form suggesting if people wish, they can contact owners, but it's often the nominator often does not contact the owner. They will sometimes contact the local councillor, but we have no way currently of acknowledging nominations as they come in.
Oh, okay, so the owner isn't notified.
Correct.
Okay, so as it got to Committee of Adjustment some months later, he would have learned of it then.
Through the chair, it was at the Committee of Adjustment actually before the nomination. And it was refused by the Committee of Adjustment and appealed, and it went to the TLAB the following March. So the nomination came in December.
March of 2022.
Correct.
Okay.
So the nomination came in December 2021. And I cannot speak to any awareness that the owner had, but at the time, we did not reach out, nor do we typically reach out to speak to an owner about a nomination.
But would it have come to in refusing it? Was it refused because the C of A panel or the TLAB panel learned that it had been nominated? Did that factor into their decision?
No, the decision was based on other planning matters, both the original C of A decision and the TLAB were refusals.
Okay. So this is a very large Page and Steel original. If this is listed, it's not that they can't alter the house in any way. It's a very large house to begin with. And if listed, it just means certain processes have to be followed. But a great many alterations could happen on the inside, could they not? There are similar houses in this neighborhood that have been fully renovated inside.
Correct. The inside could be entirely changed, and the outside could be subject to sympathetic additions.
So with if I'm looking at the footprint of the house, a decent architect wouldn't even have to be as talented as Page and Steele's architects were back in 1935. But a talented architect could make quite a large dwelling inside the footprint of this house, could they not?
Absolutely, they could, yes.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions. That helps me, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher, questions?
Yes, thank you. Just to be clear, it's a listing, so it's just saying we're interested. And, thank you. But had there been a public discussion about this? Had it traveled, was that the committee? But there's been no actual ability to have a public discussion on this, has there?
There was a public discussion at the Toronto Preservation Board related to the listing.
But there's been no ability for a councillor to have a public discussion, has there? I guess I'll ask the city clerk about that. I'll ask somebody. City manager isn't here, acting isn't here. I don't know who should answer that, Speaker.
Answer, can the clerk answer? Do you know? No? I don't know who
Well,
can
who's
answer.
gonna- just stop the time then, please.
Yeah.
This is about the election rules, and we're all behind the 8 ball here. Somebody has to tell us that.
Okay, so who can tell us? I don't know.
Through the speaker, if the
yes.
counselor could re-ask the question, please.
It really has to
I could
do
give it
with
a
the
shot.
ability of a councillor to have a public discussion about a property or anything on this agenda right now. I'm not sure that is something you can answer, Mr. Linder.
Well, I would just offer that the ability for the counselor to become engaged would be through one of the processes during this period of time even, one of the processes that is part of a counselor's normal day-to-day charge.
Our normal day-to-day charge is to be in touch with our constituents about issues in front of them. And I don't believe we're allowed to do that. I'm trying to establish that here today, and I'm looking for somebody in authority who knows that rule and can explain that.
Okay, okay, clerk.
This,
Madam Speaker, Councillor Fletcher, I believe, is referring to the use of corporate resources during an election period policy. There are restrictions, certain restrictions on members from hosting community meetings during this period. It's a policy that council has approved in the past.
I'm sorry, it's a city council policy, or is it an integrity commissioner? I don't know if city legal.
The use of corporate resources policy is a policy of city council.
And a policy of city council. So we have put ourselves, I guess, in a position, question to you, that even on issues, we haven't had city council meetings during that election period, but now we have city council meetings during our election period. We've had 2. And because of our own policy, which was drafted by staff, not city councilors, we are unable to communicate directly with those citizens, residents who are affected. Would that not be the case? Correct? I'm correct, right?
Madam Speaker, I don't know that the question is really about that policy, but the policy is required by law under the Municipal Elections Act. Every municipal council must pass a policy with respect to the use of resources, limits on resources during an election period.
So, just to be clear, Mr. Clerk, we have to pass a policy, but the policy isn't mandated. That's our own policy based on advice from staff, I would suggest, correct?
Yes, Madam Speaker, that is correct.
And which staff would have made that advice?
The policy really falls under the city manager's ambit as the administrator of the election. How the city supports or doesn't support candidates during an election is a responsibility of the city as a body, not of the clerk.
Okay,
So we don't have our deputy here
No.
acting, we don't have our acting.
no, so Councillor Fletcher, do you have any questions to
Well,
city staff?
to me, that's an important question, because every single one of these issues.
Councillor
Sorry,
Fletcher, there
Speaker,
isn't
if you don't
anybody
mind.
here to answer that question. I
Yes,
don't
if
know.
you don't mind, nobody's here to answer my question in this chamber. I'm flagging that that might be a problem, Speaker.
Okay.
And that in general, now, because that was my question, we can't have the public discussion because we've imposed these rules on ourselves. I
Right.
got the answer. Thank you. And so I just have another question about the September 30th date, because it's just a listing. The September 30th date isn't a drop-dead date for this particular.
Through the chair, at the last regular meeting of City Council in July, City Council directed staff to bring a report to this meeting, speaking to the inclusion. So we are satisfying that request.
I do understand that, but it's the referral. What would the impact of the referral be? Would it drop dead because of September 30th, or would it be maintained as an issue to discuss? Because it's just a listing.
I believe the potential impact of a referral for heritage is that we would not have a listing in the event that demolition was applied for.
Because of, I'm just going to ask the chief planner, because of the September 30th date, or just in general, because we can't make a decision between now and later?
The latter, through the
you.
speaker, it's a general situation. There is nothing about September 30th because there is no waiver in play on this application. This is just a decision for council to either list it now or defer the listing late
I get
until
it,
later.
I understand. It's a little different than the designation and the
Different
September 30th and the legislation. This
That's-
is a little different than
that's
the
correct.
legislative requirements. Thank you, Mr. Lintern. See our acting city managers here, and just, you missed my line of questioning, which had to do with our inability to actually inform people in our neighborhood about things that are happening, yet we're having council meetings. So that's been answered. But there was a suggestion that we couldn't discuss anything with city staff, that they couldn't discuss things with councillors during the election earlier, which I gather you had to change. But I'm wondering, where did that originate, that opinion? Was it from legal? Was it from, who originated that opinion that staff couldn't discuss things with us because it was the election period and it was a blackout? If you don't mind me asking that.
So through you, Madam Speaker, it's been long-established policy as we hit election years, and it's included input from many individuals, including the Integrity Commissioner, city clerks, and legal, et cetera. So just to make sure that everybody's in compliance with appropriate legislation.
No, the answer question is, where did it originate telling city staff that they could not discuss matters with councillors?
Right, through you, Madam Speaker, through city policy.
No, somebody had to send a letter. Where did that happen?
Well, you've seen through you, Madam Speaker, you've seen the communications that we've provided staff, giving guidance on the appropriate engagement with elected officials during the campaign period.
I have.
Right, so.
I've seen that says they can discuss things with us, but I have emails from staff prior to your fixing that says they can't discuss anything with us, and I'm asking where that originated from.
So through you, Madam Speaker, I think we did rectify the issue, Councillor Fletcher, and I appreciated it being pointed out. It was just a matter of interpretation of a communication that had been sent. It was founded in the policies that we've approved, but we did correct that. Staff do know that you have the role, as you are seated now, as an elected official, and that we just need to be cautious in the manner in which the conduct is occurring.
Correct.
If it has anything in respect to the election period.
Absolutely.
But we did correct that. It was just a
So there was something that was
miscommunication.
sent out
Yes.
by city manager's office, by clerks, by integrity. I can't figure out who received
So
the
through you,
original.
Madam Speaker, if you're speaking about the initial
Correct. I
communication,
am.
which has since been corrected.
Correct, yes.
That was a combination of effort between interpretation of the policy, including staff in the city manager's office, strategic communications, et cetera. But I think the most important part is that the confusion that caused was identified and communications were sent subsequently to make sure that we clarified, and hopefully that's clear now.
Certainly, thank you for that clarification.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Perruzza, question on the item, please. Okay. Councillor Pasternak, question on the item, please.
Yeah, I just wanted clarity on when we cannot have public consultations during an election period. In the 2018
Councillor
election, there
Pasternak,
was-
Councillor, we're getting off topic here. We're discussing an item, CC 50.5. That's what we're discussing. Do you have any questions on that item?
I understand that there's an element of community consultation
Well-
embedded in that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, speakers, if you can put your name on the screen. Councillor Thompson to speak.
Thank you, Speaker. I have a motion which is basically to refer this matter back to, do you guys have it? Yeah. What the earliest meeting back, whatever that is. It was supposed to have been sent up, so.
All right. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Thompson.
Okay, thank you. Speaker, I'm going to move a deferral on this particular matter for a number of reasons. I mean, I think that it's unfortunate that you have a property and someone has determined that they'd like to see it listed and or designated as a heritage property. I get that, and I know in my ward we've had several. But what is really concerning to me here is that it appears that the property owner was never notified. I don't know when they actually received notification. I did read the letter from the lawyer, and there are a number of issues there. And it isn't about the Committee of Adjustment matter. The committee and TLEV has ruled on this, and I'm satisfied with that. But it's really about the process of fairness, and due process, in my view, has not been provided to the owner of this particular property. And I think that our process should be examined because I think it's important for the public to be notified, particularly if you're a property owner. Your largest investment that you make, which is buying a home, and decisions are being made absent of your input. I understand the legislation, but I actually don't think it's fair. And I think it's really about fairness as part of the process here. And so for those reasons, I'm moving a deferral on this. I'm not suggesting that we won't arrive at a situation where our able staff are able to say, yes, we should list and designate and so on, and I'm satisfied with that. But for me, it's a simple matter of input by the property owner, which I'm learning through the correspondence that's here that I've read, that it appears that there are huge concerns by the property owner and their legal representative about notification and or the sort of, and again, I'm not going to question this particular part, but they make reference to this. They talk about preventing the misuse of the process, which is a view that they have. I don't necessarily know that is correct or incorrect, but it is the perception that is the reality here. And I think that for us to defer this and bring this back in December, certainly after the elections, I'm sure the local councillor and others will have opportunities to discuss and meet with the property owner and perhaps have community meetings to discuss this particular matter. I imagine that there are other Page and Steel development and or properties of importance in the community, since generally a developer doesn't just build one property. And so there's perhaps the opportunity to do more. I think that there's time enough. I mean, we're in the midst of election. We're here. This is my first time in my history as an elected official that I'm coming for 2 council meetings to deal with matters while we're actually in full election mode and so on. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So we're hurrying up and advancing this, and I think that it really doesn't actually preclude a final decision at a later date, which may arrive at where we are today. But for me, simply, it's just a clear focus. As I campaign, I hear from people saying, you guys are not providing us with notice, you're not talking to us, and so on. And here is a perfect example of that, which through the correspondence from the legal representative from the property owner, and obviously, I suspect they're speaking for the property owner, that due process has not been given according to their understanding. And I've heard from the staff in terms of what the regulations, what our rules are. I would say that they're inept. They need to be changed, quite frankly, because when you take it upon yourself, or a member of the public says, I'm going to ask Heritage to look at listing and designating, and it seems to be in secret. We operate, in my view, the operation should be more transparent and open, and it isn't here. And it's not the fault of the staff. It's the fault of the legislation, and I think it's wrong. And so for that reason, I'm moving a deferral in order to allow the owner and their legal representative to meet with our staff and local councillor, if he or she chooses to host meetings and so on with the members of the community, that affords them the opportunity. But I think that's really where it speaks to the fairness and a due process, which I think we have an obligation to ensure takes place, Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, on the motion by Councillor.
On to speak to the deferral motion.
Okay.
Madam Speaker, my name was on the list. I'm the local councillor.
Well, is there a problem?
May I speak to it, please?
If I could, Madam Speaker, I'd like to defer to the local councillor on the deferral motion. He'd like to, yeah.
Sir Matlow. Okay, I see your name on the screen now. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Councillor Matlow.
Yeah, I am, colleagues. I'm frankly very surprised, and I'm struggling with the words to sort of describe how much I'm struggling to respond to this, because I'm floored. The weirdness of this situation is that, notwithstanding the debate and the discussion that was just had, this has been a public discussion in the community since the summer. This is no surprise to the community. It might be a surprise to Councillor Thompson. Councillor Thompson has not spoken with me. I don't know if he's spoken with staff. This is the first that I've heard that Councillor Thompson has expressed any concerns, like literally this very moment. My understanding, I mean, the only thing I can see evidence is that Councillor Thompson is basing his motion to defer this off a letter from a lawyer who is representing the owner of the home, who of course will have some objections. Not of course, but in this case they are. But this has been a public community discussion. This went through the right process. It went to our heritage planning staff. They objectively and independently reviewed it. They brought forward their recommendations and went to the preservation board. And here we are, with the recommendation. So this isn't any different than most any recommendations that we've heard 1,000 times over. And typically we don't have these big debates and big discussions because we have some confidence in the recommendations that were brought forward. So I don't understand the root of why this has become what it has become today. But what I can tell you, quite frankly, is that if you support Councillor Thompson's motion based on whatever it is, there's a likelihood that this, potential heritage home will be demolished. So like that, I mean, that is the real life consequence if you defer it. There's no waiver. There's none of that. So I think, Mary and her staff did their due diligence. They did follow the process. And if we want to debate like improving processes, wonderful. I mean, that is a different item at a different time, and I think it's really valuable. But they really did follow what they were supposed to do, and they did it with full transparency. And again, in the community, like this is not a surprise in the community. So Councillor Thompson, again, I have not received a single email, call, or any correspondence from Councillor Thompson about this whatsoever. So this is weird and odd and irregular, and I would really ask you to just question what we are doing at this very moment, and please don't allow this to be demolished, just because Councillor Thompson is asking you to. Thank you.
Councillor Layton to speak.
Yes, thank you very much. I would urge you not to support the deferral motion. I'll just tell you really quickly why. We heard from city staff earlier that because if we don't follow staff's advice to list the property, which doesn't mean it can't be changed or demolished later, but it allows for staff to take a second look. If we don't list now, the applicant would be fully entitled to go for a building permit to demolish the site, and we would not be able to say anything from this point forward, despite the fact that there's evidence in this report to suggest that there could be heritage value on this site. So I would urge you to not to support this motion. I would also point out to the owner and developer and lawyer in this case, if you don't like the timelines in the process, go talk to the provincial government who keeps changing them.
Councillor Carroll to speak.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Just on process, Madam Speaker, if we begin to defer and try to change outcomes because we don't like a policy, when we have followed the policy, we really won't get anything done here. It's quite common to find, hey, this could be done better. I quite agree with Councillor Thompson and the lawyer who wrote us a letter. I think owners should get a letter saying this has been nominated and it's going through a process right now. But that isn't the process right now. The process as it stands in writing, every section of it has been followed. And so we have to have regard for that. There is another room in which you can go forward and begin to amend policies. But if we amend them every time we just don't like the outcome, even though we followed the policy that council set in place, and so we say, okay, I'm not going to do anything because I don't like the answer here, then we really are risking the loss of a beautiful property like this. We're risking all sorts of major works not going through because we followed it. We could follow a policy to redesign a road to the letter, and then a neighbor could come forward or a lawyer could write a letter and say, but we don't like that you're going to do that road in such and such a month. And now we're at a standstill, even though we have followed a policy that lays there in the public books for all to see. And we're going to stop and then figure out whether or not we like our policy. We won't get anything done. We will truly be nothing but policy wonks, not deliverers of service, not expediters of the wishes of the community. We'll just be people who sit around and tweak policy day in and day out. And so I think we have to say to ourselves, here is a property that we've heard needs to be listed, just listed, and we got to proceed with that. And as to the notice requirement, I do believe that needs improvement. But I know exactly where I'm going to do it. I'm on my way to planning and housing in the next term to say, let's add that to the policy. Let's add a section that speaks to a new kind of notice requirement. In the meantime, this is a perfect example of a Page and Steel home in 1935.
Thank you.
Beautiful sample on a street on which others like it are being destroyed. We need this sample.
Thank you. Just to remind members of council, we are speaking on the deferral, so it's 2 minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I apologize.
I think there's a bit of confusion this
apologize.
morning. Councillor Holiday, 2 minutes on the deferral.
Thank you, Speaker. It'd be 2 minutes. So I just find this really worrisome. I'm looking on my screen at MM 47.76, and that was the motion that we all as a council voted on in July. We passed it, that asked for staff to come back with a report on this address. What do you know? There's the report. And so the staff's advice is really clear, they think it should be listed. I guess we could reject that notion. But I'm just really worried about what we're doing here and what it says about us as a council and the use of resources. I mean, there's a build report out there about a benchmarking report about how long it takes to get things approved, and it talks about the availability of planners. We just sent the planner off for 2 months to write a report on this. Here it is, and it's going into the bin, or it's going to get deferred, right? And my colleagues talked about what some of the implications could be of that. I don't know. I mean, just everyone has an opinion on this. We should just vote on it, is my opinion. Whether you agree with the staff or you don't agree with the staff, it's your right as a member of council. But this is troubling, the process around this. And I regret that this is what we're doing on our last couple of agenda items of a very successful council term and a number of things that I'm really proud of. But this is not one of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, on the deferral,
May I have a recorded vote, please?
recorded vote.
Thank you.
Councillor Fillion, if you are present at the meeting, can you signify or turn your camera on so that we can cross-reference your vote with your presence? Thank you. I'm going to call members who appear to us not have received the vote, so I'll start. Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong, please. In the affirmative, thank you. Councillor Cole, please.
In opposition?
Thank you. Councillor Robinson, please.
Opposed?
Thank you. Councillor Grimes, please.
In the affirmative.
Councillor Thompson, please.
In favor.
Councillor Lai, please.
Opposed.
And Councillor Bradford, please.
Opposed.
Speaker, the deferral motion does not carry. The vote is 10-16.
On the item? The item on favor. On the item on favor, show of hands, opposed if any, carried. Our next item, CC 50.7, 551 Mount Pleasant Road. Councillor Robinson, you held the item down. Do you have a question? Pardon? Oh, sorry. I missed that one. Sorry. Our next item is CC 50.6, 1233, 1235 Queen Street. Councillor Fletcher, you held the item down. Do you have questions of staff?
Nope.
No? Does anybody have any questions of staff? Okay, Councillor Fletcher, would you like to speak?
Yes, I have a motion, Speaker.
Okay, we'll put the motion on the screen. Okay, Councillor Fletcher to speak.
Yes, thank you. Here is the motion, and it is to deny the designation, but to have a listing come back that would indicate the cultural significance of this particular location for the Chinese community, for the Lee family, and for East Chinatown, the East End of Toronto. I always usually support heritage listings, designations. I have the first neighborhood conservation district in the East End, did that many years ago, the first heritage plaque district in the Carla Dundas area. But I just find that on this particular piece, that I don't see, it's not a Page and Steel home. It was an original building from 1921. It has had 4 additions. It has been changed many, many times. And I believe what the real significance is the cultural significance to the Chinese community in my area and for the city of Toronto and for the Lee family. I don't believe there's anything architecturally significant. I would have a hard time finding that, but I believe it is culturally significant. And I think when I'm speaking about that, it is definitely a place where many Chinese workers were there, that a Chinese business, and I want to remind everybody what it was like. These were people that started a business in the last century, that years ago we apologized for the head tax here in this council. When I first took office, there were many people there who actually were people that paid the head tax, that people that set up businesses that were Chinese businesses faced tremendous discrimination in this city. As a matter of fact, they often still do. We have a whole task force on anti-Asian hate. But that is the issue here. How do we acknowledge this location, the significance of having Chinese-owned, Chinese workers at that juncture in our city, not a building that has been added to a number of times. Across the street from this building is the Duke of York Hotel. The Broadview Hotel, these hotels were all on Queen Street on your way to Kingston. This was the route out of the city. They were majorly important, architecturally significant locations. That one is listed. The fact is that I think that we have to send a message clearly about what is architecturally significant and what is culturally significant. So I'm very sorry to have to do this to staff, but that is what I'm going to move today. If we had had more time, if this had been part of a public conversation, because as I indicated in my earlier questioning, we've never had a public conversation. I've not been allowed to have any meeting about this particular item. I can't communicate directly as the councillor. I cannot play my role. So I'm giving everybody here notice. If we are going to have council meetings after the deadline and what's called the blackout period, we have to figure out in our policy, because the clerk has told me we put that policy in, we need to figure out how we're going to be able to have that conversation. So that is my motion here today. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. We do have a question for you, Councillor Holliday. Pardon? Oh, just to speak. Okay. Councillor Carroll, you have a question?
Just a quick one of clarification. So we started out with notifying staff, stating our intention to include it. Your motion still leaves open that it may be listed. This may still be listed as a heritage property.
Yes, yes.
You just want them to look at it in a broader way.
If we designate it, there's a drop dead date, which actually doesn't cover a whole number of issues that we have here today. And that specifically was the reason why we had to have this, that what we have to make decisions by the 30th, yes or no. There has been no public meeting of any kind on an application. I will say that in 2016, in the Ashbridges precinct, which I worked on with Councillor Bradford's predecessor, there was an recommendation, a requirement to actually look at listing anything significant between Leslie and Coxwell. That didn't happen. Or we would somehow not be in this situation that we're in today, Councillor.
Right. Okay, that clarifies it. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Councillor Holliday to speak.
Thank you, Speaker. I guess building upon the conversation we've had so far in the meeting, I have concerns with this. And I respect Councillor Fletcher has an opinion on this building, and she stated it, and that's her job as a councillor before us. But there's a bit of a story to this particular item, and it was in the newspaper. It was interesting. I've got the article here, and there's a picture shown of the building and a story to it. And as I understand, there were some objections raised at the Preservation Board in the context of a housing discussion. Very interesting public policy, right? It was I guess I'm going to paraphrase. It was questioning, how much time and effort and how big is our appetite to protect buildings of heritage value, and what does that mean? Councillor Layton raised a little bit of a specter of that, of how that plays against other priorities in the city. But again, I find myself with a report in front of me, and there's this picture circulating. I wonder if the clerks could post another picture. If the building is going to face execution or demolition, at least we should look at it right in the face. Hopefully the clerks can put that up. Anyways, I'll continue to talk. All it is a Google Street View taken from Queen Street, because this is one of the other sides of the building. But I thought, we could do a little more justice for this building and give a bit more of a flattering view. These are in the report, if you want to dig through them, but I got that off the internet. I chose that year because there weren't leaves on the tree and you could see the building. Question about heritage value. It's in the report. The staff gave us their advice. There's literally check boxes in the report. So we as council can either agree or disagree with their assessment, vote it down. But I'm going to agree with their assessment. But I think that the message I wanted to leave that was the most important was...
Nurse to 411, bed 4. Nurse to 411, bed 4.
I guess what's troubling, and this is the theme, is, we commissioned this by asking the staff to prepare these types of reports. It's a lengthy report. There are 38 pages, a lot of research, a lot of really interesting pictures in there and stories about this building. But, if you don't designate it, you might as well just throw it in the bin. And that's the sad part about it, because I alluded to that before, that there was a report out there about how, we needed more planners' time to get more approvals through. And, just a couple of council meetings, we were talking about how to attract and retain talent in the planning department. Nothing says we value the work more like throwing it in the bin. And so, agree or disagree with designating this, I guess that's our right. But it says a lot about the process and how we approach it as a council. And I really regret that, and I felt it was important to say that. I respect the work. I don't always agree with the work of the planners, but there it is, and we've got that report before us. It says to designate this building, and it lists the attributes why. And part of it is the details on the front of the building, the red used in the frames and the doors, and the legibility of this building. That's something that was evolved over time, and there's ways to integrate that into a final solution. I understand it makes it more complex, but we asked for the report. You can't walk two sides of the street. You can't say that you care about heritage and then selectively choose the locations. And that worries me. That worries about how people watch this process unfold. So members, I hope you think carefully about it. It's about one site, but it's about the overall process. And I guess there's varied opinions on it, but I just hope we use care with our resources going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bailal to speak.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think it's been quite an interesting conversation that has come up, and there's clearly a need, I think, for this council to think how to deal with heritage in our city. And I think our staff probably could use some direction from council on how to move forward on these issues and with these reports. I think heritage is really important. I truly believe that, you know, for anybody, for a city to move forward, you know, you need to understand and know where you're coming from. And for us as a city, especially a city that, you know, has 50% of our population that wasn't even born here, it is so important to maintain heritage, to maintain history. You know, for me, one of the things that bothers me all the time is, you know, how does the City of Toronto doesn't even have a City of Toronto museum, right? Because I really think that there's very different ways that you can celebrate and preserve heritage and history. And there's different tools. And I think we need to be able to use that in different ways. I think that what is happening a lot in our city is that heritage is sometimes being used as a tool to stop development. Let's be honest, it is. And for us also to think that there's not a cost to preserve some of this heritage, it's very naive. There is a cost, right? There's a cost that this city is spending billions of dollars in creating affordable housing because there's an affordable housing issue in this city. So when we prevent higher density, or when we tell somebody that they need to preserve the entire building or a certain building, I think we need to keep that in the context. Now, this is not to say that we should just ignore all the heritage buildings out there and you know, just bulldoze everything. That's not the case. There's so much out there that needs to be preserved, but I really think we need to be conscious. And again, I always say that planning is, we need to balance all these priorities, right? And I think this council needs to give some more direction to our planning in order to set the priorities right. I will be supporting Councillor Fletcher's motion. I think it is important that that we look at these different priorities. And again, I also emphasize Councillor Layton mentioned the same thing in his project. We're finding that more and more often, that, you know, it's a fast-growing city. We have a lot of priorities going on, and we have to balance these properties. And I just think that we need to be conscious that there is a cost and a benefit to maintain heritage. And every time that a project goes through this analysis, we need to bring that forward, and we need to create the tools to truly preserve the heritage and the history of our city, while being able to deliver on the priorities that this council has identified, such as environment, such as housing, and such as heritage. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perruzza to speak.
Thank you, Speaker. I'm not going to belay this much. I just simply want to just say this. So I look at this building, and I'm going to support it. That's fine. But I look at this building, and I see, while somebody else sees heritage, I see a hodgepodge, right? I see, you know, 2-3 different styles of renovations, different bricks, a different form of architecture in one part of the building as opposed to another, and then some plastered over stuff to make it look like, you know, some plastering stuff attached to the building. Fine. You want a designated heritage? Okay, I'll designate it heritage. Because, as Councillor Holyday suggests, it checks the boxes. But I have an issue with the boxes. Some of you will recall the Downsview military base, right? Remember Downsview military base, big military base in Downsview there? There were these officers' homes built into this woodlot. Very iconic. In my view, captured some history related to the city and the military, Canada's military, in this city. I remember asking our heritage preservation folks to take a look at that, and I don't know, I guess it didn't check the boxes, right? Because they said, nah, demolish them all, clean them all up. I understand, you know, the lands were owned by Canada Lands at the time, right? They had different plans for the site. And the Canada's military, in some of those very iconic homes, didn't have to preserve them all, but maybe try to capture a few of them, to preserve, underscore, and enhance our military's history in our city. But that didn't check the boxes, so fine. I'll support what's in front of us today, because some planner went away, did some work, wrote a report. We don't want to trash that report, let's throw it in the bin. And it checked the boxes. But let's be clear here. This is very, very subjective stuff. So maybe what we should have is a review of the boxes themselves about what history, culture, heritage, what that is and what that might be for us. So thank you for listening to me for 3 minutes and 27 seconds.
That's your shortest speech ever.
On the motion by, Mayor Tory to speak?
Yes, Speaker, I would just like to rise for a moment or two, just first of all to say that I will be supporting the motion, but I also, and I support the comments of Deputy Mayor Bilo, but I also support some of the comments just made at the end of Councillor Perutz's remarks, because I think we find ourselves trapped, and I do want to take a bit of issue, respectfully, through you, Speaker, with the comments of Deputy Mayor Holliday, because, you know, in the end, there's no disrespect of the process here. The process deliberately ends with the City Council, and we are sent here to make, and by the way, to be accountable for the judgments that we make. And so to me, I don't have the slightest concern with anything. I mean, I've said many times that I try to follow the advice of our professional public servants on most of these kinds of things, but it's our job to exercise independent judgment here, or collective independent judgment, about these kinds of things. And so to me, it's not troublesome at all that we would have a discussion here, as we had the previous discussion, and in the end, a motion was moved earlier on about a deferral of one of these matters, and it was defeated. But there was a discussion had, and lest the taxpayer in that case, or the resident, thought that they didn't have the concerns heard, they did, and the council made a decision. I was on the other end of that, and it was fine with me. I mean, the council made its decision, and as it will in this matter. I think, you know, I'm one of those who agrees with some of the comments made earlier on about how we haven't done as good a job as we might preserving our heritage. You know, there's various places you see that all the time. You see it, but you can't see it. If you read the book called The Ward, which I always think every member of Toronto City Council should read, as almost like the sort of one of the documents that you read when you're onboarding yourself, it has pictures in it. I mean, the commentary and the narrative of The Ward is very interesting in terms of the history of this part of the city, but the pictures are staggering. And I'm sure some of the buildings you see in there that you just wish were still here were buildings by the time they were demolished that had been allowed to lapse into a state where they just had to be demolished as a matter of safety or something like that. But some of them are so beautiful, and you'd say to yourself, how could they not be here anymore? It's just examples of what was here. You even go to the, and some people would say this isn't the best of examples, but I had occasion during the pandemic, and I'd been quite a few times before, to go to the Guild Inn and walk through the grounds there, and you see some of the facades of those buildings, and those are replaced today by some of the sort of more, I'll call it more contemporary, iconic buildings that make up Toronto. But if some of those old buildings were still there, I think of cities like Chicago and Milwaukee, where they have perhaps a better mix of the old buildings in the downtown financial district and the new ones. And we have fewer of the old ones and more of the new ones, and I'm not sure that was all a good thing. But I think that the comments made by Deputy Mayor Bilo about the cost benefit are very important right now, because we're also faced, and you know, we can't have it all ways. We are faced with a housing crisis in this city. And you know, I am determined, if I'm given the privilege of being back here, and I think a number of us, in fact, I would presume all of us in different ways, that we have to come to grips with that and try and address it. And some of that is all kinds of different means that are in place to limit the degree to which we can do even very modest developments. This is not a big development. This is a modest development, but every unit will contribute to helping to address the shortage of housing generally, because there's a housing shortage generally. It isn't just affordable housing. You know, the law of supply and demand actually does work, but when you're short of supply, the price is going to go up. And if we can increase supply of all kinds, but with a special focus on affordable housing, we are going to make the city more affordable and make provision for this to be a city in which everybody can live. And so in this case, when you look at the cost benefit, it maybe isn't even looking at the cost benefit as much as it's looking at the building and the history. And I think what Councillor Perruzza said, that's why I took some note of his comments, because he was talking about those houses and the military history. What Councillor Fletcher has moved here is a direction that says we are going to find a way to honor the history. And frankly, when you read this report, for me, and I'm a non-expert reader, I'm not an expert in heritage architecture and so on, but when I read it, it's the story that is more a part of the fabric and the development of the fabric of the city and the presence of the Chinese flavors and things in our, spreading through and being something that became into common use and that happened out of this place. But it's the story, not the building. And what I read about the building, I'm not sure I would share exactly in the words that Councillor Perruzza used, but it didn't seem to be that extraordinary. The report sort of said it kind of was, but it really wasn't written in that way that would cause you to say, well, this is an open and shut case of Page and Steele home, in Forest Hill. So I guess, I think in this case that the idea that Councillor Perruzza suggested, which is that we take it upon ourselves, those of us who are lucky enough to be here after the election, to take a look at the boxes and make sure that we take account of the fact that in 2022, with a growing city, yes, we want to be committed to heritage preservation, but we also have to take account of the story versus the building, and we have to take account of the overwhelming need we have to address in a responsible manner the housing crisis that we face. And all of that has to be taken into account in how we make these decisions. But the fact we make them here, to me, is what we're here for. And the law requires us to have this meeting, otherwise we wouldn't be having it. And we're having here with these matters quite properly before us because that's what the law said. So I will support this motion. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. So on the motion by Councillor Fletcher.
Recorded vote.
Recorded vote, please. Recorded on Councillor Fletcher's motion.
Yes, we're going to record it.
Sorry, I
Yes.
can't, it's,
Recorded vote.
thank you.
Speaker, I'm going to call members who appear not to have received the vote electronically. Councillor Lai, please.
In the affirmative, please.
Thank you. Councillor Cole, please.
In support of Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson, please.
Opposed.
Thank you. Councillor Grimes, please.
In the affirmative.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, please.
In favor.
Thank you. And lastly, Councillor Bradford, please.
In favor, please.
Speaker, the amendment carries. The vote is 23-3.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Last item, CC 50.7 by 51 Mount Pleasant Road. Councillor Robinson, you held the item down. Do you have questions of staff? Councillor Robinson.
No, I don't have questions. I'd just like to speak.
Okay, does anybody have any questions to staff on the item? Okay, to speak, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. A flashback to last election, 2018. We'll all remember it forever. Distinctly remember the boundaries of our ward shifting and the challenging times that were before us. And many of us lost parts of our ward, much loved parts of our ward, as things shifted around. One of the great new additions to Ward 15 Don Valley West was the Regent Theatre. And I was particularly excited because many of you know my background is in arts and culture. And Midtown has a lack of arts and culture. There just isn't enough. And so when this file was transferred to our ward, Don Valley West, from the predecessor, Councillor Matlow, who had ensured that it was listed in collaboration with the community, particularly Sarah, now CEDRA, the Community Association, and a working group, we were really excited and very happy to see this happening, except for the threat of it not continuing to be a theater. As we know, and as we've heard, a listing doesn't do a lot. In last spring, I had a beautiful 100-year-old home in Hogs Hollow ripped down because it had simply been listed and not designated. Well, it was illegally ripped down, so it wasn't just about the designations, but I have a lot of that happening in my ward. So the debate I'm hearing today is a bit worrisome, quite frankly, that we're not really going to preserve our past in this city. But this is an exciting day because we are now designating the Regent Theatre, and it is one of the last Main Street vaudeville venues still standing in Toronto. Plus an amazing gathering space, community space. Many of our children have performed there, my children have. And it was originally called the Belsize. It's gone through different different stories, but basically its main story has been for productions. And so we have spent hours, my team and I and the neighborhood, over the last 4 years after we adopted this initiative in trying to ensure we ended up where we are here today. It's beyond exciting. We had to ward off many inappropriate applications, glass towers and other inappropriate fits, and many proposals, many meetings, hundreds of meetings to get where we are here today, not just the designation, but to ensure that it was retained as a theater. And so I want to give a little shout out to a gentleman named Patrick Cowie. He was representing the original owners in this, and every time there was an application that maybe wasn't ideal, he was at my door talking to me about it, because he too wanted to see some arts and culture brought to Midtown. And so I can't tell you how excited I am about this, and the community is. This is a wonderful outcome that it will be a theater, and our amazing heritage staff. And I want to do a hats off to Tamara Anson Cartwright, who along with her colleagues worked on this to bring this to this council meeting. Thank you so much for your hard work to ensure the roots of this space is really maintained for arts and culture. The biggest shout out has to go to Tara Bruce Productions. Bravo, bravo, bravo for undertaking this big feat that will transform the Midtown area forever and also maintain our history and our culture. So this is a big success story, a very happy day for our area, Midtown, Bayview, Mount Pleasant. People are very excited about this initiative of a building almost 100 years old that will be preserved and tell Toronto's history. I just want to wrap up by saying this is not a tool to stop development. I find that very concerning, that statement. That's overused statement by developers. Toronto should be a live museum. Not that you go to a museum to see Toronto, but you walk around the streets of Toronto and see it firsthand, our history, and that must be preserved. So Toronto must be maintained as a live museum. Thank you very, very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the CEDRA and working groups and all the community members who were so enthused and passionate about getting to where we are today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Matlow to speak.
You know, I want to just add my my gratitude, my expression of gratitude to our community working groups and the great Gordon Pinsent, the great Canadian actor who has not only been an inspiring voice throughout this process for me personally, but, told us stories of, back in the 60s when they used to host, I'm sure you heard about this, Jay, the spring thaw, right? And this was like the region has played a role in our city story where it was a rite of passage for a lot of young Canadian talent. So, we're both celebrating a local historical site, but we're also celebrating Canadian culture and Canadian theater. I also want to express my personal thanks to Jay Robinson. When the ward boundaries changed, this was, personally a story for me where as a local resident and the local councillor, I've cared so deeply about this theater, and like Jay's family, it's meant a lot to mine as well. And we have a lot of personal memories and stories there. And the way that Councillor Robinson and her office have continued the stewardship and and the care for this theater to see what we've realized today is something that we, on behalf of my side of Mount Pleasant and us personally, are very grateful for. So I look forward to many years in the future celebrating at the Regent under the wonderful production company of Tara Bruce out of Newfoundland, who share our vision, our community's vision, our city's vision, to bring the Regent back to life, to contribute to our city's internationally celebrated theater scene. It may host, maybe other types of cultural events in the future as well. And another thing I just want to mention about Tara Bruce, they also have signaled that they also want to host community events and let it be a building that the community doesn't just walk by, but actually is involved in and can contribute to the life of our neighborhoods as well, which we are very grateful for. So thank you, Jay, and thank you to Tara Bruce and to everybody who's made a big difference, and to Heritage Planning for your thoughtful recommendations.
Q. On the item? On favor? Opposed, if any, carried. Thank you. Mayor Tory.
Well, I'm going to err on the side. There's just some brief end of meeting acknowledgements, Speaker, if Council will permit me, because I think this is in fact our last meeting before the election, although one never knows. And I'm in the unusual position, I'm not sure it's ever happened before, where I will both welcome to her first meeting and pay tribute to her on her last meeting, to Councillor Milchin. As far as these go, and you're familiar with it because you've been around, this was pretty good. I mean, as a first one and a last one. But having said that, thank you for putting your name forward. If you think about it for a minute, I mean, we all put our names forward to try and serve the public in one way or another, but to agree to, go through that process and to take on this work, which was important work, serving the constituents of that ward for such a brief period of time, really says a lot about you. And so I just want to say that we're grateful for that, and I hope that you enjoyed this brief experience. Maybe it'll whet your appetite for something going forward. But there is another way you have to go through to get here, which we're presently experiencing. So thank you, Councillor Milchin. And I should also say I don't think we had the opportunity to pay tribute, because it came at an odd time, the announcement of the retirement from politics of Councillor Layton. And I just want to, on behalf of your colleagues and on behalf, I'm sure, of the people, to say thank you for the service rendered, I'll say to date, because I have no doubt when it comes to you and others who have taken leave for a while, that it will be for a while from the public process. And, this is a place where, as is the case with parliaments and so on, where they're put together quite deliberately to have people express a variety of opinions and have people come at issues from a different series of different perspectives. And I find, as someone who's been deeply involved, was for 40 plus years in the partisan process, I find this place particularly joyful and positive because there aren't any parties here, and because that means you can work in common cause with people where you may not have the same background in terms of politics or even some of the same ideas on some of the issues. I'll just name two where I have found personally as mayor, Councillor Layton's leadership, and I will say it's been his leadership very helpful to me, and I think helpful to the city, because I think it goes beyond me. One is on the environment, and in particular on our plan with respect to climate change, and pushing all of us to set some goals that are ambitious and are tough. And I was engaged in a discussion with somebody just the other day on a question that I put to you in the hall one day, walking along, hoping that we'd have a chance in the next term, if we were both sent back here to work on it, which is, how do you pay for things that we must do? I mean, the question isn't should you do them or not. The question is how do you pay for them? Because that's difficult. We have a lot of pressures on us financially. But the plan and the elements of the plan are in front of us, and we've set goals that are quite deliberate. And I think I know you had a large hand in that plan and in making sure that it was supported here at the time it was brought for its approval. The second issue is on our Indigenous communities. And I just want to say to you, I've taken a keener, more focused interest in that over the last 4 years, my second term. And I will say that's largely thanks to you and the work that you did and the things you brought to my attention and the things that you pushed for, including something that I think is respected as a very important first step today, a couple of years later, which is the establishment of an office inside this building, specifically dedicated to making sure those issues got the attention that they most definitely warranted and have warranted for a long, long time. And we're moving forward now. I'm so proud of what we're doing with respect to truly partnering with Indigenous communities to build housing. And the fact we've responded to what they said, which is they wanted to be real partners, not people who were kind of recipients of some nod that we would give and say, don't worry, we'll look after it. And the same with the reconciliation report. I mean, if there was a fault found, and I've come to understand this much better, the Indigenous communities don't want some report that's written with the best of faith here by us and by the people who work with us. They want to be genuine partners sitting beside us at the table writing up the report. And so the one that we did pass, which was a historic moment, now needs them to take ownership, as we invited them to do on the day we passed it, to say, okay, refine this, help us make this better so that it's of you and by you and for you as it is. And again, you had a huge role to play in that. And so I just want to say thank you, I think on behalf of colleagues and on behalf of people across the city, not all of whom got the opportunity to vote for you, not all of whom would have voted for you if they'd had the opportunity, but they certainly, I think, always have respected you, as I have, as being someone who is very well motivated and comes here in good faith to advance things that you believe in very strongly, and some of which, a number of which have certainly helped me to do my job, and I'm sure other people in this chamber to do their job. So thank you, and good luck in what you're going to be doing going forward. We all know, Speaker, I have one more important acknowledgement. We all know what good friends former Councillor Cressy and Councillor Layton are, and I think he took one look at the Cressy plan, which actually involves being home for dinner with your children once in a while, and maybe having a weekend where you're not going to some meeting or other, and he just found that plan too good to pass up, but we wish you well. It is also, Speaker, the last meeting, and we paid tribute at a prior meeting, but I want to just acknowledge this is the last meeting at which Marilyn Toft will be sitting at the table, which she has done so well and where she's performed such wonderful service to the city, and we did acknowledge that at an earlier meeting, but I thought that in light of the fact it was the last meeting where you'd be sitting there, it won't seem quite the same not to have you sitting there, and there will be an occasion that's coming up in the next few days to make sure we again pay tribute to your service. But it's quite remarkable, and it's had a lot to do with, everybody who sits at that table has a lot to do with what we do here and in this room, but you've had a lot to do with every aspect of how we all sort of got here and all of that, and done in a way that I think has done nothing but to inspire our own confidence, but through that, the confidence of the people that you served so well. And so thank you very much for that, and again, good luck to you as well.
Thank you. Councillor Milchin, you have a motion to introduce the general bills?
Speech.
Oh, sorry. Speeches? Oh, go ahead. Yes. Could I have the clerk? Clerk, did you want to speak? Yes, Counselor Milchin, you have a motion to introduce general bills.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. That leave be granted to introduce bills 1110 to 1140. And just to speak, because everybody wants me to speak, I just want to thank this council and the City of Toronto for my little brief opportunity to serve the residents of Ward 1 and to assist council. I'll just add it to my 40 years of public service that I'm honored and proud to serve the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall leave be granted to introduce these bills? All those in favor? Opposed, if any, carried. Shall these bills be passed and declared as a bylaw? All those in favor? Opposed, if any, carried. May I have a motion to introduce a confirming bill? Marilyn, would you like to do that? Okay, so I have a motion to introduce the confirming bill. Mayor Tory.
Appeared on any screen. My laptop has gone dormant.
It's on the
Happy
screen.
to do it. There it is. That leave be granted to introduce a bill to confirm to the point of the introduction of this motion the proceedings of City Council Meeting 50 on September 28th, 2022.
Thank you. Shall leave be granted to introduce those bill? Recorded vote.
Maybe I'll just vote.
Speaker, if I don't vote, will Marilyn be able to stay longer? A deferral.
Councillor Mihevik, your vote, please. Councillor Bailao, your vote, please. Councillor Lai, your vote, please.
In favor.
Councillor Buxton Potts, please. Councillor Cole, please.
In support.
Councillor Robinson, please. Councillor Robinson, please.
She is.
Councillor Robinson, we're looking for your vote on the bills. Councillor Bradford, please.
In the affirmative?
Councillor Thompson.
In the affirmative.
Councillor Grimes.
In favor.
Councillor Carroll, please.
In favor.
Councillor Crawford, please.
In the affirmative.
Councillor Perruzza, please.
In the affirmative.
Madam Speaker, the confirming bill carries unanimously, 25 in favor. And thank you, members.
One more vote. Shall this bill be passed and declared as a bylaw? All in favor? Show of hands. Carried. Thank you, and this meeting is adjourned.
Thanks, Madam Speaker.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and everybody in the clerks.
Yeah.